All right. Hey, we'll get started real quick here. I am very excited. I like giving you guys other voices to listen to. Very grateful for James last week coming in. He's always a hit. And this week just worked out to have Steve Jenkins come. Steve's official title is the head of global teams, something like that. Spent how many years were you at the college? About 16 years at San Diego Christian, where I graduated from many moons ago, working with their teams, and has a heart for missions, heart for travel, heart for equipping people. And as we've been talking about going and growing from the inside out, having Steve kind of come in and give us a broader perspective of our role in the world is something I was really excited about. So the timing was perfect because we were coming back from our trip, and I asked Steve, and he was very excited, and he is very well prepared. I see that. So we'll see. We'll find out. But you got your notes, and at this point, I wanted you guys to give a warm young adult welcome to Mr. Steve Jenkins.
Thank you, George. When I was at the college, we'd always bring George in to speak in chapel, and so good stuff there. He knows guys like Professor Steve Witten and all the posse. So, hey, a little bit about me. So I did a bunch of years in youth ministry, about 30 years in youth ministry, never saw myself in higher ed. Okay, I did go through like college and then went to seminary, and then the door opened up to come here. And way back in the day, 7-8 years ago, we actually had the college right here on this campus before the Generations building was put together. And so during that time, I'm doing stuff with the college, and one of my big passions was missions. And in youth ministry, we saw that missions was kind of the one thing that God used to really bring about change in the life of our students and our team that we took to different places. So we run a lot of camps. We'd have like 9 camps going each year. And it was almost like going to Christian Club Med, you know. I remember talking to one student, what's going to be your decision this year at camp? My decision this year is not to make a decision. You know, it's like, what? Because he'd come back and he'd be frustrated trying to figure that out. But when we stepped out of our comfort zone and we go and partner with somebody globally, and they're a good team partner, then that was something we saw that was just a big life change. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that today. So the concept of a world Christian, okay? So I know that most of us in this room, if any, are probably going to go into career missions where I'm going to be a career missionary. And if you know Shadow Mountain, we have a lot of them. If you go on the second floor and go to the missions office, you'll see a board. There's about 200 missionaries that we support as a church, which is amazing. So my new job, I'm just a little over a year into it, is taking people, if you're the missionaries and you say, hey, I could use a team to come in, a short-term team, and help drive our ministry and move us forward, then I'd get that response and I would come to you folks, you know, in the church and say, okay, let's build a team. So we just got back from an Albania construction trip, amazing. Leave for Israel a week from today with the high school squad to work with one of our missionaries. And so I'm like living my dream job. It's something I love doing, passionate about missions, and it's better than I deserve. You know how God does that in our lives? So I'd like to talk to you today about the concept of a world Christian. And so this term came about 1979 as they had this giant missions global conference and trying to figure out like what can we as the global church do to bring the gospel to people that are all over the place and probably people that are in the hard places to go. And so a guy named David Brandt put this term together. And so the short version of a world Christian is basically to make Christ's global cause a part of my life. Okay? So I'm basically going to move from thinking locally here in San Diego, you know, and in San Diego, it's not an easy place to live financially, right? I've heard a stat that San Diego is the least affordable place to live in the United States. It might not be the most expensive, but based on our income, it's probably the most challenging place to live. We've done some stats. To live in San Diego, if you got your family, you got settled, about $100,000 a year. That comes out to about $300 a day. 40% of the global population live on less than $2 a day. So for us in San Diego, this is not the real world, even though we might think it is. And so today I want you to think a bit broader than just our backyard right here in San Diego in the United States. And if I look at like what Jesus says about like a global cause, what we need to be doing, how can that kind of infiltrate my life, and how can that be something that I grab onto and allow God to change me? I may not be a career missionary, but there might be an outlet where I can find a way to do missions, hopefully each year. I can connect with George and go to Alaska and work with the Zimmermans, right? And then there might be other opportunities. We got about 6 right now with the global teams. We'll probably enlarge that for next year. You could look at that and say, hey, I'm going to go and serve. The team we took over to Albania a couple weeks ago, they're older guys like me. So when we had to change our application date, or the number on the application, because one guy was 79 years old and he got disqualified for being too old. And so we have all these old guys, but we probably had about 175 years of building experience represented in that team. And they went in and they trained some young Albanians on how to make shipping containers into cabins for a summer camp. And it was an amazing trip. So we want to take a skill set that you have and find an outlet to do global work. We did a trip to Tepic, Mexico, down like by Puerto Vallarta inland, and it was a medical team. Took down 15 nurses, doctors, flew in the little plane, probably like what you do in Alaska, and did a medical clinic for 2 days. Some people walk 4 to 5 hours just to get there to see a doctor dentist. So if there's a medical profession there, if you're an athlete, if you have a building skill, pretty much whatever you have in your skill set, I believe we can find an opportunity for you to serve globally. And that's what I want you to think about with being a world Christian. Look at like what the Christ cause is, Jesus reaching the world, and how we can build on that. So there's definitely a gap. There's a gap between where we are right here in the United States and what happens globally. I've heard a stat in the United States here. It's a few years old, but it might still be accurate. In our country here, we have like one full-time Christian worker for about every 226 people. So that's a pretty good ratio, okay? Globally, there's other places that might have one Christian worker for 50,000 people. And so there is a gap out there, okay? And so as we understand what the gap is, then like how could God use you folks, how could he use me where we could step into that gap and make Christ known? And so that's kind of the challenge that we have. And to look at that kind of brings us to that global awareness, okay? Have you folks heard of the 1040 window? 10 degrees south, 40 degrees north. And it's in the red here. And it's probably, so this is the widest part of the gap right here, the 1040 window. It's where most unreached people live, unreached or least reached. And it's the hardest place to go. I remember hearing one missionary say, all the easy places in the world are already taken up, okay? And what's left are the harder places to go. And there's opportunity to step in to some of these hard places and do work. I was telling George just a few minutes ago about work in Thailand that I've had a chance of partnership for about 26 years, taking teams over. At the college, we've taken about 350 students over that 15-year window. Amazing opportunity. Bringing water to an unreached people group for the first time. Water changes everything. Cuts the infant mortality rate down in half. Our partner there also does coffee. Anybody drink coffee? Okay, they just got destination coffee on their list through Starbucks, so that's a big deal. So they introduced coffee as sustainable income, and in 5 years, they can come out of the poverty level. When I started working with Thailand, the average income for a family was $66 a year. First trip, I had some Oakley sunglasses. I put them in a tree somewhere, couldn't find them. I realized that my sunglasses were more than what the average family makes in a year. And so I'm processing all this stuff going, what can we do? So there are opportunities even to hit in this 1040 window. Most of our trips probably are not in the 1040 window, but as we look at like the Great Commission in Matthew, you guys know that one, right? Where Jesus, his final words, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lo, I am with you always. If I look at that and I say, wow, okay, so that's something that, as Jesus gave that to his disciples and he gives it to us, like, how can I process that? How do I make this fit in my life? And I think one of the key words here is the word go. And talking with George a bit earlier, I think he gave you guys a challenge. When there's opportunities, instead of saying no, say what? Yes, right? Yeah. Maybe, a definite maybe not. No, so go, man, there's something special about going. So I want to challenge you with that. One missiologist, guys that study missions, say, as you take a team over to work with a missionary partner, as you just show up and you're present, that's about an 85% success rate. Okay? So, I mean, that's pretty huge, right? If I can hit that part, and just by going, it makes an impact with the people. They know, that, man, you're coming from somewhere. In Thailand, they look at us and go, why do you come here? You can't walk up the hills very well. Looks like you have malaria. You don't do good with the food. And then that's the platform where you can share, right? And it's like, it's because Jesus loves you. I know he loves me, and I want to share that with you. We're going to bring you water, but the best water is Jesus, the living water. So we find some outlets, to work on that. So, man, if I believe this, then I've got to figure out, how does that fit in my world? Could it even fit in the place where the gap is the widest? And I believe that's possible for us. And Shadow Mountain, big missions heart, they want to facilitate that with our missions department. Do you guys know how the offering and the finances work here at Shadow? So as you give, anybody know what percentage goes towards missions? 20%. Pretty difficult to find a church that even does 10%. So Pastor Jeremiah and the church is incredibly committed to missions. That takes care of the 200 missionaries, but now we have this opportunity to break into new partnership and work with those missionaries in other countries. So if you like to travel, if you like adventure, and you're willing to kind of step out in faith and see how God can use you, our church can help with that, okay? And in a very real sense, it's kind of following what Jesus says, because as we go and we serve globally, Shadow Mountain's really committed to having church partners that work in the missions world, okay? And so there's sustainable work that continues on from there. So, your opportunity that you have at this stage in life can be incredibly, incredibly unique, all right? I got all these old folks my age that want to go on missions trips, okay? And then there's 41 kids at Christian High that want to go on missions trips. So maybe our gap is right here with, the young adult crew saying, hey, what can we do? How can we figure this out? Hey, I'm willing to take and go on an on-ramp with missions if I've never gone on a short-term missions trip before. I'm willing to give it a shot. And this Albania group, we had 3 people that never on mission trips before. And it was phenomenal for them. They're doing a lot of processing and trying to figure things out. And that's a good thing. And sometimes God kind of crushes us, and then he rebuilds us stronger. So with that, man, your generation, this is going to be the generation that's going to impact our culture and then actually have the opportunity to step into other cultures and bring the gospel. And maybe those missionaries are there already, and Jesus is already there in those countries, but we have a chance to come in and put some gas in their tank and encourage them and equip them and see what God can do and how we can strengthen that partnership. And there's great relationship that goes with that. So man, how can your generation make this impact? There's a lot of missionaries we have at Shadow that are retired. We got one lady we're going to go visit in Descanso. She was a missionary. She's this feeble little lady that has a walker, okay? And she served in the Amazon for 50 years translating scripture. It's like, she's like a living hero, And she has a driveway that's all mud, and it's all rutted out. So we're going to take a group from Alaska, John Bruninger coming down doing a reverse missions trip, and go up and put gravel in. We'll have to get her some off-road tires on her walker so she can navigate the gravel, but it'll be better than mud, right? So, so this next generation, how can you connect? May not be career missionary, but how could you factor that in with a part of your life? Let me share a quick story about my wife. She works in the healthcare with Sharp, 18,000 employees in San Diego. She's done some global mission stuff with the nursing background, and she found out through her company with Sharp that they will give her 1 week off a year with humanitarian pay if she goes somewhere in the world and does any kind of nursing. So she's done that in a few countries, and then she gets back, and then her boss wants her to share in a room like this with a bunch of other nurses. And so she shares a little bit, and she gets really nervous, and her ears turn red, and she's like, she's not a public speaker, but she does a good job. So all the Christian nurses are going, sign me up, I want to go. So with that organization, 1 week off a year, maybe that is that on-ramp where you can find that, and look at that. So your generation, very unique in the chance to make a difference, impact community. So our challenge is, how can I take the Great Commission? How can I take this concept of going and making Jesus known, making disciples? How can I fit that into my world? How does that play out? You know, George will be a great one to talk to, and say, help me figure this out, George. Where's an on-ramp? Last week you had James Darnell come and speak, right? He spoke on courage, right? So for some of us, it might be, all right, man, I'm going to be like Joshua, I'm going to have strength and courage. And Moses is gone, so somebody needs to step up, and God lays it on my heart, so here we go. I'm willing to give this a try. So I want to encourage you in that. Maybe you've done short terms and say, all right, I'll sign me up for the next spot, see what we can do. And how can we live missionally? How can I have like this missional piece in my everyday life? And it's a battle. We have to fight for it. But it's a worthy battle, because I believe that's something that God has for each one of us as believers. So there's 3 easy steps. I want to give you 3 words that it could possibly be a catalyst to say, okay, I want to be this world Christian. I want to understand where the gap is. I want to see the need, and I'm willing to step into that with some other comrades, some other partners, and make a difference for your kingdom, Jesus. All right? So 3 easy steps. The first one, man, got to catch a world vision. So become globally aware of what's happening. We know what's happening in San Diego. We know what's happening perhaps across the border. But we may not know what's happening in other countries. So as we had a chance to learn about what's happening in Albania, they came out of 30 years of communism. We met a bunch of believers, and this is wild. All those believers were first-generation Christians. There was nobody that went before them except for 4 guys in this city of Corsi. Somehow they were able to meet underground and hang on to their faith. We met one of them, Pastor Ali. He was like 85 years old, and we heard his story, And so like in Albania, man, coming out of communism, there's no, Christianity is just kind of a blank slate as they step into that. And they're doing well, but they need that encouragement. They need that love. So that's where like training and, developing leaders could be huge. You might have that skill set. Mark Dalton, who's right down below second floor, he's taken a team of 5 over. They're going to do a doctrinal piece with, anybody know Brian Moulton? Okay, so he was a Bible guy at SDCC for a number of years. He's going to teach that part. And then Mark and his wife Donna are going to teach marriage enrichment. So they're going to do that leadership development piece. That's really cool. If any of you can speak English, I guarantee there's a platform to bring English into other countries. This camp in Albania, there's a lot of Muslim kids there, and their parents really don't want to send their kids to a camp, a Christian camp, right? They're worried about that. But at the camp, which is going to happen in July, they're actually going to teach English as part of what they do on the camp experience. And so those families that are a bit resistant will say, okay, I'll send my kid. So we're taking some people over. They're going to cook. They're going to clean dishes. And I got some room on the team if anybody's interested, okay? And then they're going to teach English right along there. And so that's a skill set. If you can teach English, you can go pretty much anywhere on the planet. If you have a medical background, no problem. So the mission world is open up. I discovered this one. If you have a veterinarian background in the global piece, it's huge, because so many countries base their wealth and their sustainability on their animals and their livestock. And if you can come in and help them with their livestock, that's a huge piece. Who would think that a veterinarian could be like a global missionary, And so things are wide open. So, So catch a vision, all right? Become aware of what's going on globally. George can help you with that. We'll be glad to help you in the missions department. And then pray. Say, God, what would you have me do? That's a big prayer. Lord, send me. Probably one of the most dangerous prayers we'll throw out there. But if God lays that on your heart, we know that he's going to make us successful in that if I continue to follow him, right? And it's amazing how God provides. It might be financial resources. It might be a good partner that will use you and give you opportunity to share your faith, and then you build a strong team, go from there. And then the third part about catching it is, man, I just got to own it. At some point in time, I got to put all my chips in on the table and say, okay, I'm all in. Any of you guys ever watch bull poker? Okay, if you get bored sometime, just Google search bull poker. Bunch of crazy cowboys and cowgirls sit at a table, and they got their cards out there, and they unleash a bull to see who's going to stay there the longest. And it can be a big train wreck. Those guys are all in, right? You're all in if you win. We need to be all in with like what God is doing in our life. and how he can use us to further his kingdom. So we catch it. The next thing we do, we got to keep it. Man, it's a battle. We go on a short-term mission trip, and the statistic is that 6 weeks after I get back from an amazing mission trip, my life goes back to normal. So something happens, and I just jump back into the normal grind of what life is like in the United States, what life is like in San Diego. So I have to battle to keep that, okay? Man, that could be a daily battle. It might be just grabbing some resource and reading about different aspects of the global church and becoming aware. If you go on a trip and you go to Alaska and you know what the Zimmermans are doing and you find out where these youth come from camp, to camp, you could pray for that and you stay connected, you build a relationship from there, okay? And I really believe that as we can fight that battle and we see how God can use us, and it might only be maybe like one trip a year, that can really add balance to our life. And it can really help us figure out that economy, especially if we can look at it and say, hey, how could I stand in the gap where Jesus might be least known? And I would venture to say, for the folks that get flown in to the camp with the Zimmermans, a lot of them probably have never heard of Jesus, and they're probably bringing in the right people where you have a chance to share. Albania, definitely that way, work in Thailand, unreached people group, never seen a person before, never heard the name Jesus, So those opportunities are out there. The last one is just to obey it, and as I kind of catch what this world vision looks like and how I can be a world Christian, man, how can I just live obediently in that world? God, how can I be faithful to what you're doing? Okay? And so with that, man, that can change a bit of our decision for the future. There's one guy here with his family. His name is Joe Colombo, and he's got some kids, and they're learning how to fly planes up at Cal Baptist. And he and his wife, they do missions vacation trips. So they take their vacation every other year, and they go and they partnership with a missionary, and that's their vacation, going in doing missions work. Super missional plan for their family, And how could I incorporate that in with what I do? How can I grab some friends and say, hey, let's trust God. Let's go do something big for his kingdom. Let's step out of our comfort zone, make ourselves vulnerable, and pray that dangerous prayer, Lord, use me, and then jump in, okay? That can be something that can be a compass in our life. And I've got a little card on the table. I probably didn't bring enough, but if you need some, I'll get some more printed up for George. So this is something we use with our teams, okay? And any Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts in the room? Okay. If I got a compass always points which direction? North. Okay. So we're thinking, all right. So as I step into this and say, God, use me, it's easy to kind of get lost along the way. Maybe the food's way different. Sleeping, jet lag, language barrier, I'm not used to doing this kind of work, whatever that looks like. And it's easy for me to get lost. And so we've said, man, if we can hang on to this verse in Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 6, it's a pretty common verse. In the Jewish culture, it's called the Shema. And it's, man, love the Lord your God, heart, mind, soul, strength. Okay? These commandments keep on your heart. That's kind of like my true north. If I can look at that and say, God, no matter what happens in the course of my day, if I can just find a way just to continue to love you, that's going to keep me on track. Okay? But there's a few more verses. So on the other side of the card, we got 4 others. So Jesus is asked the big question by the big dog attorneys with his, Jews that were trying to trip him up, right? And they asked Jesus, hey, what is the most important commandment? And if you remember what the Jews did, they took Moses' 10 commandments and they built it out a bit, right? Like over 600, okay? So they asked Jesus that question, trying to capture him and trap him. And he says, hey, he quotes the Shema that every Jewish kid knew growing up. Every Jewish adult knew, okay? He says, hey, love the Lord your God with your heart, mind, soul, strength, and what? Love your neighbor as yourself. So again, that's that compass. Man, if I can love God and I can take the people that I'm with and I can love them, that's going to keep me on track, even if I get a bit lost. In James, it talks about, hey, I gotta have this faith that also has an outlet for works. So we see a need that people have, we step into that need, and we meet that need with Jesus' strength and with a good partner. Okay, so then my faith becomes alive. Okay, because I found an outlet to do something good with it to bless other people for the kingdom. Okay, Another verse is in Acts 1:9, a big one, where, we're told that we're going to be witnesses. We don't have to have all the answers. I can just say, here's what I know. Here's what I know about Jesus. Here's how Jesus is real in my life. I can give witness to that. And boy, it's like starts here in San Diego and El Cajon, and it goes across California, then it goes out to other countries, and it goes all the way to the ends of the earth. And it just follows the Great Commission. Okay? Yeah. So those are four key verses. The Great Commission is one of those. So that can be that compass in our life. So I brought some compasses. So what we do is we go on trips. We buy these little compasses, and I talk to the manufacturer. We try to get a good deal. And they go, where are you going? Oh, we're going to Southeast Asia. Oh, the compass won't work there because, the whatever equator and all that stuff. And go, well, it doesn't really matter because we're not going to use them for that anyway. We're just going to use them as a reminder. So we just have this, and then on the back we put the Shema, Deuteronomy. So if I get a bit lost on the way, it's hanging on my backpack or something that's commonplace, and it's just a reminder, okay, I'm going to love God, I'm going to serve other people. And man, if that's the greatest commandment, if I miss that in my life, could that be the greatest failure? So man, I'm gonna find a way to incorporate that within my life. All right. So the little cards there might be a good thing, a little reminder for you. Have fun with that. And then let me close out with just giving you. I got like 5 minutes. Okay. I want you to see that okay, so we're just not making this stuff up, because anytime we're trying to figure out how does this work in my life, the best person to look at is who? George? George is a pretty good person to look at. George is shaking his head no. Man, if I can look at what Jesus did and how he lived life and how he interacted with people, that's going to be a great challenge for me. So let me give you just a few verses on Jesus kind of standing in the gap, breaking all the cultural rules, and building the kingdom, okay? And these are probably all familiar stories with you. So the first one for the sick, he goes to Matthew's house, and he says, hey, man, I'm not coming for the people that are well. I'm coming for the people that are struggling, that are sick, that are hurting, and they wanted to make Jesus king, and so they're trying to figure all that out. So Jesus comes for the sick. Are there sick people globally? Yeah. We go to Thailand, we hear about how everybody's sick all the time because they don't have clean water to drink, and babies are dying like crazy, and just clean water changes everything, and then we can give them Jesus, a living water, and use that as a platform. So Jesus stands in the gap with the sick. You might find some people around our own community that are hurting, that are sick, that just need some love. And maybe you have the resources, or we could find the resources here at church to bless them and help them a bit, People respond really well when you find their need and meet that need. Okay, for the lost, man, the people that don't know Jesus, Jesus looked at that and he says, man, he sees all the people out there, right? He has compassion on the crowds and go, man, all these people, they just don't have a shepherd. They don't have somebody to come along and kind of guide them. And they're just kind of like sheep wandering around. Do sheep have a good defense mechanism? This is it right here. They go, bah, that's about it. That's all they got, So, they can be a big target, People that are lost, you could find out where lost people are and say, all right, I'm going to find a way to bring Jesus into that community. That's exactly what Jesus did, with the lost. The next one there, man, the people that are broken, the people that are poor, Jesus steps into that world, and so that's going to take some time. It's going to take some energy, but man, for the prison, the lame, the blind, the people that have leprosy, the people that are deaf, man, my wife had a chance to go to Vietnam, and they went to a leper colony, which we don't really see in our country, right? And they had dry leprosy, so it wasn't like super contagious. And so the guy that was the partner, they found a guy that invented this little thumb thing, because as you get leprosy, you sneeze and your fingers fall off or something, so it's not a good day. So they couldn't feed themselves. So they made this thing called a lap, and so they're giving it to the people in the leper colony. And then my wife was one, and they all went up, and they just actually put their hand on a person's shoulder and prayed for them. And the people just like melted because they're untouchable, and those people exist in our society. And they might look at you and go, why do you come here? How'd you even hear about us? And then you can give them Jesus, all right? Jesus did that. He got in trouble for that, right? Quite a bit, because those people were unclean. They were social outcasts. Yeah. Okay, and then for the outcast, One of the first missionaries is that demonic guy in the Garden of the Gadarenes. You know, he's like so crazy. He's running around naked. He's living out where all the tombs are, just going wild. They actually had like probably all the blacksmith guys and that make metal had a contest to make chains to hold him, and he'd snap all those. You know, Jesus pulls up, you know the story, pulls up on the boat. If we're in the boat, one of the disciples, we're probably thinking, oh, and this guy's probably making noise and coming charging up the boat, and the disciples might be moving towards the back of the boat. Jesus gets out, heals the guy, right? The demons go on the pigs jump off the cliff, you know, floating up dead pigs, you know. People in the city hear about it, they come back and they see this guy that has this life change because Jesus delivered him. I mean, he was like living out in the cemetery type thing. And then he asked Jesus, he goes, can I go with you? And what does Jesus say? So word that George doesn't want you to use when he asks you to go somewhere. No, you know. And he says, you go back to the cities and tell them about what happened. You couldn't argue with that guy's testimony, could you? He's probably all scarred up because he'd whack himself with rocks and bleed and hemorrhage all around. And so all of a sudden, he's given testimony. He's like the first missionary. How wild is that? A demon-possessed guy that meets Jesus becomes first missionary. So there's hope for us, right? And so Jesus, you know, he goes for the outcast, all right? He's standing in the gap there. The forgotten, the woman that had that hemorrhage for years, tried everything. She's unclean. All she wants to do is touch Jesus' robe. You know that story? Crowds are pushing in. Disciples are probably trying to run crowd control. And this woman touches just the robe of Jesus. And Jesus stops, and it's probably like a 3-car pile up, you know, where everybody, and he looks at his disciple and goes, somebody touch me. If we're one of the disciples, Jesus, everybody's pushing in here. But he felt like this power go out of him, and this woman is healed, you know. And so she was like the outcast. You know, she was the one that was totally forgotten, broken. She used all of her money to try to find a cure, and then Jesus heals her. Amazing what we can do in that way. So, man, it could be a bit dangerous. You know, it might be out of our comfort zone to follow Jesus where he wants us to go. But then the good news is, you know, he stands in the gap for us, right? Man, you know, he humbled himself, obedient to death, come down on a cross so we could have that eternal life. So it works for us. We have the message. We have the answer. Because as you look at the gap, Jesus is the only answer that fills that gap, where that gap is the widest. And we can find ways to bridge into that. Okay? I love this verse in Colossians 1:13, where Jesus comes and he rescues us. He delivers us. He just breaks down the doors of Satan that holds us and frees us up. It's like maybe like a Christian Rambo coming in, you know, and just delivering us. And then he takes us from the kingdom of darkness and transfers us to the kingdom of light. So that is this amazing journey that we're on, and it's so good. Look for a way to find an outlet to share it in our little community here, but then perhaps abroad. Find a spot, you know. Be that world Christian that says, okay, I understand that I need to go. And God, I'm not sure what all the answers are, but I'll pray that dangerous prayer. Lord, send me somewhere. Talk to Pastor George. He'll help you guide on that, you know. So that's my challenge for you today, is look at a way to be a world Christian. Continually be aware of what's going on. Know where the needs are. Be willing, with the strength of Jesus, to step into that need and meet that need for the kingdom work. And I think it'll be an amazing journey that we'll be on. It'll be unbelievable how God can take and use us beyond what we could ever dream of, beyond what we could even consider. So I brought a few compasses today. I got about a dozen. If somebody wants to take the challenge, I'm just going to leave them up here and say, man, I'm ready to do this, man. I'm not going to say no. I'm going to say yes. You talk to Pastor George. We'll find an outlet for you. It'll be exciting to see. All right? Can I pray for you guys? All right, let's pray.